Hey guys, what's up? Unrested here, and I am making an Unrestology today. I know some people have been messaging me recently to make a response to just some drama going on, but I'm not about to do that. I'm using my Unrestology today to kind of, I guess, explain something I feel is important that I explain. Um, my video yesterday dealt with suicide. Um, you know, I don't want to go back all into it, all in and dredge up the details again. You can just go back and watch it if you want to. Um, and after that, a couple people messaged me after and were like, "Man, I didn't know suicide was such a big deal to you and everything." And I guess that's a thing. And I guess I'm going to talk about that today. And it's not something I bring up a lot. I've brought it up in probably 3 videos in the past out of like 800. And so, I mean, it's not a great icebreaker. It's even hard for me now to be putting words together when I have to start to think about these things I'm going to talk about. And let me just actually say before I even start this video off, if you are suicidal right now, or you're like feeling suicidal, or you're just like even in a dark place, don't watch this video right now. This isn't the time. I'll put a list of suicide hotline prevention numbers in the notes below so that you can contact one of those instead. Don't watch this. Highly advisable not to if you're in a real dark place. Even if you're not feeling suicidal, if you're just feeling in a dark place, this isn't the time, because this might be a little bit dark. So as I mentioned, not in the video yesterday, but I kind of mentioned it in a Facebook post, was one of the main reasons that suicide prevention is really important to me is the fact that I had actually 2 friends in college commit suicide. And this is kind of what I'm going to try and talk about today. I talked about this a little bit in my Aoki ga Hara video, but what I was able to do was just put myself off screen and just record audio. But today I'm just going to like do it on screen and just tell you the whole story, the whole details. I was kind of vague. The things I am going to change today is the names. There's also some time that I worked actually at a suicide hotline in college, and the 2 people I'm going to tell stories about from that, I've actually kept in touch with, and they've actually let me before talk about their stories. I changed their names too, of course, and kind of some of the locations and stuff just to keep them anonymous, but usually you wouldn't talk. I'm just saying this isn't my prerogative to release personal information about people who would call the suicide hotline. These 2 people in particular have given me permission to talk about it. But the first 2 people I'm going to talk about are 2 friends from my college who actually followed through with suicide. And first of all, let me just say suicide is kind of like comes around for different reasons. There isn't one thing we can pinpoint as to why. You're building your life around many different things. It can be a girlfriend, it can be a job, it can be multiple things at the same time, but sometimes some people build it around only one thing, and that building you're making, your house, is your life. That whole creation is what you're living. Your life is like a house. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Bad metaphor. Like I said, my mind's kind of boggled while I'm trying to do this. So, your life is like a house, and you're building this house the whole time that you're living your experience after experience to go through life. And the problem is some people sometimes only focus too much on one part of the house. Like they'll build a great bedroom but not put any kind of like living room or anything else in it, as in maybe they're only building their life around their job, or they're only building their life around a girlfriend. And then sometimes when those one things collapse or fall out, or they lose that job or they lose that girlfriend, they feel like they've lost their life and they don't really see a point to living. Now that's one way that suicide, I feel, occurs. There's another way where I feel like a person feels like they're on fire, and they see a lake in the distance, and that lake is death. And if they just jump into that lake, the fire will go out and their whole body won't be burning anymore. And that can occur for so many different reasons. There's so many different ways that can occur. But the 2 I'm going to talk about today is the 2 names I'm changing. I wrote down these fake names here so that I'm not, the thing I worry about is that while I'm telling this, I stutter or suddenly mention the real name, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep this as anonymous as possible. My friend Matthew. Okay, so Matthew and I started college, the 3rd year of my college together. We actually went to community college first, and then both ended up at the same university. and that was up in Florida somewhere. I'm not going to say where because, like I said, I want to keep it as anonymous as possible. So during that time, we worked together a lot on music. Music was our big thing. We were like really passionate about like metal and hardcore and punk rock and just everything back then. I remember the one big thing we had in common is we really liked the band AFI. I probably still go back and listen to a lot of those songs for just like a nostalgic feeling. But anyway, so the thing with Matthew was that he was probably one of the smartest people I'd ever met. He was probably one of the smartest people I'd ever encountered at college, I'd ever maybe encountered in life. We're talking a guy who was like a musical genius, could pick up any instrument, record it on the computer, and just like sound like amazing. Like I'm talking when this guy picked up a guitar, he didn't sound like Nirvana, he sounded like Dragon Force. Maybe that's too esoteric. Anyway, so great guy, loved to make music. He would make me a lot of great stuff to sing to and things. I would make the lyrics and stuff to it. I would track in some different synth stuff and things online, and you know, we would work together and make a lot of great stuff. But the one thing with Matt was every once in a while, he would, like we would meet up, and he'd just be like, it was like he couldn't talk. It was so, I don't know how to describe. I don't want to say weird, because weird sounds like I'm judging him, and I'm not judging this guy for how he was. He just like shut down. Like, he'd be ready to work and ready to make music, but I'd be like, are you okay? And he'd just be like, I'm just depressed, man. And I'd be like, shit, well, I don't know, like, and there was multiple reasons. He had a bad home life. On top of it, like, he was kind of a party guy, even though he was like taking some of the hardest college courses ever. He was like kind of a party dude, and I think he kind of did that just to like balance work and play out. Although I do feel like maybe sometimes he got a little too hard into the partying. But anyway, he did that, and he would just get like so dark and sullen, and like we'd practice, and he'd just fucking write the best riffs ever, and it would be so great, like this emotional music, and he'd write stuff that was great, and then afterwards, like I'd call him at home and I'd be like, "Are you okay? Like, you know, you're like really down today. You like weren't talking much." And he'd be like, "You know, like I don't know, like why I exist and why we exist." I guess he always had this like kind of existential crisis of everything around me is going to be dust one day. I'm going to be dust. Everything I create is dust, and there's like no future. He had this like crazy existential crisis constantly going on, and I feel like it was almost because of his mind. Like his mind was putting him through this hell. And so I'd be like, "Well, dude, let's get together. Let's have a party." I knew parties always cheered Matt up, so that's what I would do. I'd throw together a party. I'd bring a bunch of people over to his house, and we'd party and stuff. And then he'd be back on it. He'd be, you know, back on the saddle again. Is that what you say? So that's what he would do. And I remember one time he was really close. Like he really kept threatening suicide. And this is one thing where like I got some messages during my video yesterday that some people were like, "Oh, some people just threaten suicide, but you're just enabling if you follow, through with trying to help them out and stuff." And I just feel like this isn't true, because this is exactly what Matt did. He threatened suicide over and over again. We'd have these parties, they'd cheer him up, and he'd be back on his feet again. And then I remember one party in particular. It had been 2 weeks since we had met up to have one. He seemed to have been doing pretty good for the while, but then he dropped back into this kind of like dark space. And it was one party where I was out of town. I couldn't make it. I had gone back home because college was closed, and I didn't have a place to stay for a while. And so I called up my friends there when I heard he was feeling down. I'm like, "Look, I'm not there. Can you throw a party for Matt? Like, I know he's feeling down." And they're like, "Yeah, man, of course, dude. Of course we can do that." Like, they were good friends, man. They were awesome. They were always there we were there for each other all the time. And I really miss, I don't know if I have any friends like that anymore. So they did it. They had the party. I got a call that he had just after the party, I guess, kind of just like kept partying. I don't know how you'd describe it. Like he kept partying, like he kept drinking stuff. He kept taking drugs and stuff. Like there was always drugs and alcohol at these parties. Of course, I would drink a little bit. I wasn't a big drug guy back in college, but that's what he kept doing. He would kind of like he'd be on his meds for a while, like his meds to keep him off being depressed or however it works. I don't know. I don't take any of those, but he would always complain it made him feel like a zombie, and I understood because sometimes I'd meet him and he was like really like couldn't talk, didn't move much, like kind of really sluggish, and then I guess he would kind of balance it out. I guess you'd call it self-medicate. I guess you'd call it self-medicate, and that's what he would do. And he'd pretty much overdose. Now, some people would have said like, "Oh, he just didn't know what he was doing," but we're talking about a biochemistry major here. In his drunkest state, he was still far smarter than I was, and uh, and that's what happened with him. And I wasn't there. I wasn't in town. I couldn't be there to go to his party at the time, to be the next time to cheer him up and talk to him, make sure he was okay. Usually I'd crash there for the night and then be everything fine in the morning. He was all right again, but I wasn't there for that one, and that was the one time that, after many times of threatening suicide, he followed through with it. So that's why I don't think you should always, you shouldn't, you shouldn't think it's enabling if you help somebody when they're threatening suicide. This is what I'm trying to say. Okay, and so my other friend, Derek, like Derek was friends with me all the way, I knew him from high school. We weren't super close in high school, but we knew who each other were. And we really became good friends in college because we ended up having a lot of the same classes. We recognized each other. You know, we were kind of probably both homesick, and so to feel more like nostalgic for home, or like wax nostalgic about home, we started to talk after class and hang out a bunch. And Derek was always like he was that friend, you know, who would try anything. He was that friend who would do like anything that you thought was totally crazy. You'd be like, "Oh, I dare you, if you're like in the middle of the cafeteria today, to jump in the trash can and then pop out and scare the girls who were coming in the next class." And he would actually like do that shit. Like he didn't even think twice. He was like, I don't know, kind of a mix between the people from the Jackass show and like I don't know how to describe him, but all through high school, even though he was really funny and like a really good friend, one thing he struggled with was he always had like really rough grades. Like he used to have to take like the special education classes for math and stuff like that, so he was always like a little bit behind. But he really fought his way through getting into a college, and he started at community college like me. Me because I just didn't know what to do, him because he could go through remedial classes there and work his way up to getting an AA degree and then get into college. And he did it, man. I was like so proud of this dude. Like I'm like, damn, dude, you made it all the way through there. Because he even followed me into the next college that I went to, and we were hanging out there and stuff too. And so yeah, he followed me to the next school to get his bachelor's, and we actually ended up living very close in proximity as far as apartments were concerned. We didn't live on the dorms anymore. We lived out there by the apartments during this time. And I remember him struggling quite a bit when he got to that point. Now he was going into, I don't remember the degree exactly because I was art and he was something technical, and I knew like nothing about anything technical still to this day. And it wasn't working out, man. It was like killing him, dude. Oh, I remember what it was. It was what do you call it? Like where you're like a trainer. Like you work with people's like muscles and stuff. Like you give them like a stretch and like massage and stuff. Like if they're a sports person, like a football player. A trainer. That's what that's called, right? Sorry, like my vocabulary drops like when I talk about like emotional stuff. Like I can't suddenly like drag up the vocabulary I normally have. So he was doing that, and it was really hard because I think there was one part where he had to go through some science class. I think it was like some kind of biology class that he said he just couldn't get. He kept failing it. Every semester that he would take it, he would fail it. So he eventually ended up dropping out of college because he didn't know quite what else to pursue. And we grew kind of distant more and more, and he ended up with a pretty okay job. I think repairing lawnmowers is what he ended up doing. And I think the thing that gets me Well, okay, let me continue on with the story. The the he got this job as a lawnmower repair person, and he did it to support his girlfriend who he had gotten pregnant. And then he had a kid, and then that's when we really start to fall out of touch. And now I understand why. I have 2 kids myself. I understand how easy it is to fall out of touch with people. And so that's what happened. And, you know, he's just too busy, man, just too busy. But the problem was like, he too was someone who also kind of like fell into these depressive states. And he actually ended up hanging himself. Um, he actually ended up hanging himself like in his garage, his repair garage that I guess he had at home. It was a home sort of station that he had. I think the thing that upsets me the most about his is by that time he had a kid. And whenever I think about that now, like I had done the same, or if like the same kind of thing happened to me, or if I died off myself, or you know, I want to take care of my kids all the way through their entire life if I can. I mean, obviously I can't. You know, they're gonna outlive me. But a father dying because of suicide before he can fully see his kids grow up is like what gets to me when I think about his story. And like I never got to meet his kid. I never got to meet his family again after that. Because things got even more dark and farther away after he committed suicide. And we didn't get the chance to really hang out, and I couldn't be there for him after he did leave college. I didn't stay in touch enough. You know, I guess many people could be blamed, but I add myself to that list of the many people that could be blamed because I could have kept in touch with him and just like checked up on him when I knew he'd feel down once in a while. So after that, all right, just give me like 1 minute. So after that, that's when I decided to start volunteering for a suicide prevention hotline. And mostly what you would get is students from the school itself. It was run by the school, it was for the school, and of course, that's who you would get, is the students who went for the school. I don't know why I couldn't just suddenly think of that right now. And I remember 2 of the stories, and these are the ones that I had talked to in the past, and I've actually told this story before. 2 of the ones that got me down the most, and these people made it through. They never did commit suicide. They're still alive to this day, but it was 2 different girls who called into the suicide hotline. I remember one, her story was one of the most tragic stories I think I'd ever heard, because she was a ballerina before in the past. She was a ballerina, and she was working at this factory that she worked at, but it was something with moving a large heavy part of a refrigerator, and I don't know anything about how refrigerators go together. So it was a heavy part of it that while I was moving across like a hook from the top with the conveyor belt, part of it had fallen off and crushed her legs. And so her dream of being a ballerina, or some kind of dance thing she was going through for her major in college, had been completely ended because of this. And she was in a wheelchair, and you know, she was paraplegic because of this. And like, of course she attempted suicide. She was constantly on the edge during this time where she was trying to learn to live this new life without her legs, without being able to ever dance again. And I just remember that was one of the calls where when I got off, I was like, I've got to follow up constantly with this person. Like, this is gonna kill me if I don't know what happened. And I did. Over time I did. And like, you know, slowly she reached a point where her depression and her happiness leveled out, and she lives a very happy life now. And she actually teaches other kids to use like what they do have left as far as their body, that are like, if they're disabled, if the parts of their body that aren't disabled, I can't get this out, the parts of their body that aren't disabled, she teaches them how to like dance with them, which is like, it's like really fucking, I mean, it's beautiful, right? Like, that's like the amazing thing that can come out of saving somebody from that. I'm not saying like I did it, like, but I'm just saying like, look what you can save, man. And then the other one was this girl whose parents had taken out a bunch of credit cards in her name. They had signed her name to a bunch of credit cards. And she was in a massive amount of debt. She just had gotten her school debt. She got her Stafford loans, which you get in America. I don't know how many of you know how Stafford loans work, but you pretty much end up taking out this huge amount of money. And she she did that, and then she, on top of it, found out she had been signed up for something like 17 different credit cards and was like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So she was like on the edge of suicide from this, and she had been betrayed. The only person that she could go to was her parents, of course, and she had been betrayed by those people. So who does she go to, right? Like, her friends could understand this. They weren't like in that level of debt. What helped me out working with her is I'd actually worked as a debt collector before for unsecured loans. So I knew a little bit about how to like actually manage debt, and I knew actually some of the legal process that she could go through, and that's the way I could help her with that. But I just remember thinking, like, what a hopeless situation. Like, you're in all this debt when you're not even out of college yet. And I just remember how like she wasn't someone who threatened suicide a lot. She just talked about like how much easier it would be to not be alive, and she talked about it in a way where I was just like, damn, like, she's like, her arguments were just, I mean, mind-blowing as far as like me trying to be like, but look, like, well, look, that's not the answer. But anyway, guys, that's my video today, and that's kind of a dark unrestology. Sorry, I hope I didn't leave anybody in a bad mood or in a rough place. If you are, use those phone numbers I put below. Talk to me, message me, PM me. I've dealt with some of this stuff before, and that's why I've always put in my videos in the past that if you don't talk to someone, if you can't talk to someone, if you absolutely have nobody to talk to, or if you're like that girl who I talked about who couldn't even talk to her parents, you can always message me. And I will do my best. Like I said, I don't always have advice, but I have an ear that listens. And I think that's where I'm going to end this video, is just telling you I have an ear that listens for people who are in that kind of pain, because I've had and known friends and dealt with people who've been there, and it's something we've got to be for there to be proper human beings. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. Have a good one, guys.